So hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I know a couple of the faces in the audience, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Shelley Crawford and I lead the EMCC Global Program Accreditation team. So I'm delighted to welcome you this morning to this GPS dialogue, and I'm also very excited to introduce you to Rachael, who I've known for a number of years now. Rachael is both a businesswoman and a practitioner. So she's held director roles and led multidisciplinary teams. Sorry, just give me a minute. There you go. She's led multidisciplinary teams and of psychologists, coaches, consultants at Harvey Nash Group, Ashridge Business School, and the US Center for Creative Leadership. Her prior career actually included the startup and ownership of a talent management consultancy. So as a non-executive for the Recruitment and Employment Confederation and a panel chair for the Judicial Appointments Commission. So Rachael is coming with a highly esteemed career behind her. In 2021, Rachael became the EMCC's UK president and now running her own business. And her clients include CEOs, executives, senior leaders who are responsible for creating and delivering their organizational strategy. She predominantly works with subject matter experts and leaders, including technologists, engineers, and financial specialists. Her leadership consultancy work includes board evaluation and evolution in a partnership with a Swedish business, Alumni Global. So I'm delighted to hand the reins over to her. We'll be having a discussion for approximately about 15-20 minutes. Rachael will introduce her topic. I'll put you into breakout rooms and then bring you back again after about 15-20 minutes. So enjoy.
Thanks, Shelley. Lovely to be here and lovely to see you all. Sometimes when I hear that bio, I think, is that really me? I think we probably all experienced that at different times. I'm just going to share my screen with you, so just bear with me a moment and hopefully that will work. Brilliant. Okay. So what we're going to go through together, I'm just going to give you a bit of an outline in terms of the research that I did. Talk about my study, then we're going to go into breakout groups with a couple of questions to reflect on, and then come back for a discussion, and then we'll come to a conclusion. Hopefully what I'm going to do today is to bring you out of your heads a little bit and into your emotions, your senses, your feelings, and to help you step back into the world of endings, really so that we can use that reflexivity to start to think about how we begin our assignments. And I know that not all of you are team coaches, so we can also use experiences as one-to-one coaching as well. So don't worry if you haven't got team coaching experience, you've still got experience of endings. And also we could talk about endings when you leave a job as well. That's also quite an interesting area to feed into this. So who am I, as well as all the things that I've done? I'm a wife, a daughter, a sister, an exiled Geordie, and I now live in London. I have a love of art, architecture, jazz and travel, and I realised the other day, sort of looking at all the places that I've been to, I do always seem to go to islands, so I don't really know what that says about me, but there you go, room full of coaches. I'm sure you can come up with some ideas. And my training, just so you know, my background in terms of my philosophy and methodology, I did my master's with Brooks, I trained at Ashridge, did my supervision qualification with the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, and my team coaching training with the Academy of Executive Coaching. That's Peter Hawkins, John Leary Joyce. And then I use my approach as an integrative one. As I think David Clutterbuck calls managed eclectic. So Gestalt, existential, systemic and relational practices. And then my websites if you want to look up a bit more about me. So I chose to do a phenomenological study for my master's, and did my dissertation, 20,000 word dissertation on endings and team coaching, which is why I'm talking to you today. And I think my research was shared with you as a pre-reading if you wanted to look at it. You don't have to read it. It's quite a lengthy and quite an academic document. So this will give you the more, I think, approachable and more discursive detail of that study. I chose phenomenology, which is probably one of the most difficult words to say. So I apologize for that. It took me ages to be able to say it. Because it's so close to what we do in coaching. It's more about a process rather than coming up with a theory or a conclusion. It's an immersive experience, so it's about actually putting yourself into the shoes of and talking about the experience of being at the end of a team coaching assignment. And I really kind of did immerse myself completely in it. It's about developing themes and making sense. And it's about exploring, not defining. So it's not a scientific or a qualitative approach. It's very much about sort of lifting the lid and doing a real deep dive into the subject matter. It also takes an andragogical approach, which again, I apologize, that's a bit of a mouthful, but that's really looking at or taking the view that the participants in team coaching drive their own learning. So they're responsible for taking out of the whole learning process what they want. So it's not about the coach telling them what they need to learn. It's about the participants being part of a process and driving their own learning. It's an adult learning approach, which of course we all take with coaching. And that's the link to my study. The photograph here is one that I took myself. It's from Reykjavik in Iceland, which is one of my favorite places, and another island. And I just love it because it just reminds me so much of how many of us, including myself, often go about life with this sort of our little world on our heads, our own little sort of universe. And sometimes that weighs very heavily on us as well. So I also thought the sense of it being a rock as well. And I think possibly because I did the study during the pandemic, that probably also influenced my feeling around that. So really this is about lifting that rock off, lifting that stone off, and kind of making ourselves aware and open to other things. I'm just going to check in the chat to see if there's anything there that I need to, yeah, you've got the link there. Great, okay. So just to give you a bit of an explanation of phenomenology, that lovely word. This is from a really great book, which I really recommend if you're interested in existentialism or phenomenology. It's called At the Existential Cafe by Sarah Bakewell. And you can get it in a talking book, which I did because I really like listening to things. And it really kind of helps to explain what phenomenology is in a way that's much more approachable. So it's less about, as I mentioned before, it's less about the chemistry, the botany of the plant, about the beans that are made to grow in it. And it's more about the sense. So it's more about sensing lifting the coffee to your lips, looking at the liquid shifting, feeling the weight of the coffee in your hands, feeling the warmth of the coffee as you lift it to your mouth, and then the flavor of it on your tongue. So it's the promise of what you're going to drink, the anticipated sensations, the smell, the color, and the flavor are all part of the coffee phenomenon. So it's a moving away, if you like, from that thinking, data, analysis, chemistry, the sort of what you might call the more scientific, and more around the sensing, the feeling, the emotions, the anticipation, the being very much in the moment. And so what I'd ask you today is when you're thinking about endings, is to move into that latter approach. So how did it feel? What did you sense? What emotions rose in you? What was going on around you? What was the context? So start to shift your mind into that way of thinking. And really, I guess the kind of assumption behind that is that this awareness leads to change. So it's the awareness of what's going on for us that leads us to be able to change. And it's the awareness of both the coach and the team or the client if you're doing one-to-one work. And the coach is helping the client to build awareness of their own ways of functioning, so that awareness allows them then to move into that adult learning space where they make the changes based on what they want to do. It produces a really good understanding of what's needed and what choices are open. So a lot of the work we do in team coaching is about helping people to sort of lift that rock off their head, if you like, and have an awareness of what's going on around them in their system, in the team system, and the choices and the decisions that are open to them and the things that they can do. It allows them then to make more effective decision making and to take action. It also allows them to generate more personal ownership and responsibility. So rather than being told what to do or given advice, they can actually create that awareness, see the choices that are open to them, make the decision, and then hold the ownership for that decision and the responsibility, both as individuals and as a team. And it allows them to open their field of perception. So again, to kind of lift that rock off their head, and to give meaning to their perceptions and experience, and to get closure around issues, and to be in the here and now. So we were talking earlier on, isn't it lovely to have some silence? Isn't it lovely to have that time to arrive? So to really be kind of here in the moment and to really connect with what we're experiencing. And that's what we do as team coaches with the team. And then having done that, we can have that kind of open, undirected awareness. So we can embrace that uncertainty and complexity, which in our new world is the normal. There's no such thing as it's going on all the time. So you can open out your focus, you can bring in that sensing and feeling, you can let things emerge, you can wait for things to merge, you can have that silent, quiet time. And you can just be curious and investigate things. You don't need to organize things. You don't need to look at outcomes. You don't need to look at KPIs. You're just being and sensing and building that awareness. And then within the team, talking and feeling and working with what's happening in the moment. So that's what I'm inviting you to do today as we start to think about endings. Team coaching is challenging work, and I love this image because almost you can feel, well, hopefully not disgust. That was the one I'm not so sure. Hopefully we feel very often. But these are all the emotions that you can feel when you're working with teams, and sometimes in very quick succession. Because if you think about it, and just going back to what I was talking about, that awareness, if you think about that awareness, you're taking it from multiple feedback loops. So you've got your own stuff going on. So your awareness of you as a team coach and what you're feeling, what you're sensing. So all of these emotions. You've also then got each individual member of the team and what they're sensing and feeling and noticing, and how they're making meaning out of the work we're doing together. You've then got teams within the teams. So frequently one of the things that comes up when I'm working with exec teams is how the CEO and the CFO or the MD and the FD tend to work very closely together as a team within a team. So there's that whole dynamic going on. And there's often the relationship with the CEO and the chair. There's that relationship going on. There's the relationship of all the exec team with their stakeholders in their functions. And then there's the team as a whole. So if you think about all the inputs you're getting, it's incredibly challenging work. You really have to be on top of your game, and you have to just have that awareness the whole time of working with what's in the moment. When you walk into a room or you're on Zoom with a team, you never know what's going to happen. So you can never predict what's going to happen, and that's part of the fun of the work. So the research that I did, I interviewed some really, really experienced team coaches. I mean, you know, with sort of years and years of experience. And I wanted to move away from looking at what happens at the end of a team coaching assignment in terms of outputs, KPIs, hard data. And I really wanted to look at the relationship and the relational aspect, because that's often missed in research. And actually, there's very little research in team coaching per se. I was specifically looking at team coaches who work in a business setting with leadership teams. So again, I kind of honed right down into a very specific area. And I think I've only found, and this was well, now a year ago, a couple of years ago, but I only found about 20 studies that had been academic studies that had been done. So which is not atypical of when you've got an emerging field. The research tends to follow it rather than drive it. So, so it was a really, really interesting and exciting piece of research to do. And looking at the conversations I had and looking at the kind of themes that came out of it, if you remember what we're doing here is exploring, these were the areas that came up. So I put them into 3 different areas. So one is the team coach in the field. So talking about that awareness, it's the awareness of the context that you're working in. Every context is different. So with every team coaching relationship, you're dialing up your awareness of the context that you're working in. You're also considering what your purpose is. So as I enter this field as a team coach, what actually am I trying to do? What's my purpose? Am I here from an andragogical perspective? Am I here? Do I really believe in adult learning? Do I believe in a systemic approach? What's my philosophy? What's my underlying methodology? So having real clarity around why you're there and what your intention is within that system. Who is your client? What forces are you aware of? What are you looking at? Looking at cross-cultural dimensions. The research I did with team coaches, not just in the UK, but within the US, South Africa, and also in Hungary. And then also looking at power dynamics. Power dynamics came really large in this research, very much around the power dynamics within the team, the power dynamics outside the team and within the system, and then also gender. That was something I was really interested in because I do a lot of work in technology and with engineers and engineering and kind of manufacturing. And quite often I may be the only woman in the room, or in fact, you know, there may be one other, but frequently I'm working with all male teams. So that's something that was something you need to be aware of. The other theme that came out was the guiding piece. So how do we navigate and guide this team through the learning process? I'm just going to have a glass of water. Excuse me, it's quite warm today. So how do we actually navigate with the team through the learning process as we work with them? Often I work with teams for 12 months. So it's a long period of time. The team, and thinking about the team as an entity, because one of the naive beliefs that I had when I first started this work was that the team stays the same through the whole process, and actually rarely is the team that you start with the team that you end with. Teams are much more dynamic and fluid, people come and go, but the team itself you hold as an entity. So how do you take that team through the learning process? How do you begin with your purpose and the end in mind? What is it you're trying to achieve together? And how, as a team coach, do you recognize the signs and signals along the way that show that the team are actually learning? How do you know when to bring the work to an end? How do you know when the team is ready to kind of part company with you and go off and do their own thing without you? What are you looking for as a team coach to know when it's time to end? Because endings typically don't always happen with the end of the contract. Endings can happen before the end of the contract. They can keep going after the end of the contract, and the endings are sometimes unexpected. Your work can be interrupted. So that was a whole really interesting way of looking at things. And then the bit that very often is neglected or forgotten about is the human relationship, the connection between the team coach and the team and the members of the team. It's an unusual scenario whereby you're spending a lot of time, maybe a year, getting to know the team, working with them, building a really, really strong relationship with them, building that trust and psychological safety that is necessary for the team to take the risks that they need to take to learn. And then actually you're intentionally and you know, bringing that relationship to an end. So you're ending, you're almost, as you get closer to the team, that's when you leave them. So you know, one of the metaphors we looked at was sort of that parental thing of kind of letting your children go. You know, they're teenagers, they've gone off to university or whatever, you let them go. And how do you mark and acknowledge that rite of passage? How do you acknowledge the change in the relationship? How do you pay witness to the learning? And what sort of ceremonies and rituals do you use? So again, using that in the field, using that open undirected awareness, having the ability to be agile and move between both the macros, so holding that whole system, and the micro perspectives in terms of what's going on in the team dynamic and at the individual level. So that ability to play between being very light touch, having that wide angle lens, and then to go in really deep, really sharp, focused and pointed, and sometimes having to be quite, you know, forceful with the team as well. To face into the power, the gender and organisational forces. You know, it's a tough job being a team coach. It does take courage. You do walk into the unknown often. Through your experience and learning how to preempt endings by seeing signs, as I mentioned, that the team is ready to end, or indeed, really importantly, that the team or the organisation isn't ready for this work and bringing it intentionally to an end. What's going on in the system? Actually, do we need to say, right, let's just leave this for now and revisit it when we'll come back to it at another time? And then a clear belief and altruistic desire to contribute to the greater good. What is your purpose? What is your purpose as a team coach? And is the team and your sponsor absolutely clear about what you're trying to achieve when you're contracting with the client? Guiding them through this learning process, holding the tension, and there is always tension, between the organic and the evolutionary nature of the work. Having a purpose, but being able to hold that purpose lightly. And also sometimes holding back that sense that we need to measure value. We need to know right now what it is you're going to achieve with us, because actually quite often you find that what a team values at the beginning of the relationship will shift at the end of the relationship, because that's been part of the learning process. I find that particularly when I work with scientists, they kind of want to measure everything. And actually, by the time we get to the end of the process and the end of the learning, they realize that there's other things for them to be looking at. Reading the signals, seeing what's shifted, what's changed. You know, I often notice that the team might say, oh, I wonder what questions Rachel would ask us. And that's when I know that they're starting to coach themselves, and they've taken that kind of questioning and opening and kind of curiosity on board themselves. As I mentioned, that intentional, proactive effort to raise awareness of the learning. The learning is often unconscious. The learning is often taken for granted. So what the coach needs to do is lift the lid and show the team, you know, this is the progress you've made. This is what I've noticed. This is what's changed. This is the awareness you have now that you didn't have before. And physically to remove yourselves. To make space for the team to be independent. Sometimes you need to leave just before they're quite ready, to kind of give them that sense that they've then taken ownership of that next step. And then the withdrawal, leaving it as a person, leaving that human relationship, how you're working with the team. What is it that you brought to that team that they don't have when you're not there anymore? To positively reinforce the sense of self that you have to sustain it and give yourself the freedom to leave. How do you prepare for that ending? What have you learned through the process? When you come to an end, don't just sort of move on to your next assignment, but really reflect on the relationship you've had with the team. Which relationships have gone really well, which less well? Who did you feel closer to? Why? What was it about your relationship with that person? Are all relationships ending? Who are you keeping in touch with? Who aren't you? And really honouring and recognising the connections and the relationship that you've had with the team, and celebrate this in a symbolic way at the end. So a lunch, standing in a circle, sharing gratitude, whichever way you want to do it. That's just some of the highlights of the research. So Shelley, we're going to put everyone into groups now. These are the questions that I want you to go away and reflect on. This is based on some of the work that Christine Thornton did, and she kind of raised this question around what do coaches lose and gain at the end of an assignment, but also what does the client lose and gain at the end of the assignment. So really take time to sort of put yourself back into an ending experience. Don't necessarily go for the ones that ended really brilliantly, because you know that's not always so much learning in that. Think about maybe some endings that were tricky or quite challenging, or that really drew a lot out of you as a coach, maybe ones that were difficult to leave. And then also think about your experience. So drawing you back into that more phenomenological emotions, senses, use metaphors when you're talking with each other. And then we'll bring you back in the room and we'll talk about what you discussed.
Welcome back, everyone. We were just discussing and saying how this is probably one of those topics that you would have loved to have had a load more time to discuss. But certainly what we're going to do afterwards is put you into networking groups as well. And then if you want to talk a little bit more, you can do that. So let's get some feedback from room one, which would be Harriet, Iris, and Sharifa and Memon.
Hi there. Oh, we were hoping that we would come last and could just say yes, we agreed with everybody.
What they said.
So yes, I think what do you lose and what do you gain? We felt that one of the big things that we gained was a sense of vulnerability if we were prepared to look at it. We basically, the overarching thing is just how tricky team coaching is. And how, I mean, I described it as dancing on mud, but maybe ice would be better. You know, anything that means that sometimes you'll be glorious and sometimes you'll fall flat on your face probably describes the experience of team coaching. And a lot of self-awareness grows as you move between, am I facilitating, am I fixing, getting drawn into the seduction of trying to be a leader, not be a leader, that kind of thing. So, and that affects the relationship when you say goodbye to a team, in the sense that you can feel more close than you perhaps ought to, and that's a cutting off that you need to work on, I think. So maybe this is the overall experience, is the difficulty of potentially falling over, and the experience of risk, I suppose, and exhilaration. I wouldn't move away from it for the world, but not easy. That's us.
Okay, thank you so much. Rachel, do you have anything to say, or do you want me to just ask everyone and then talk?
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, so let's get everyone to give their feedback and then we can conclude. Brilliant.
Okay,
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Harriet. The next room that we'd like some feedback from is Caroline, Louise, Victoria. I'm not sure whether she actually got to the room or not, and Pearl. So I don't know who you volunteered to feed back.
We didn't get to that. We were too busy chatting, reflecting. Pearl, did you want to share, or would you like me to share? I think.
Go ahead, I share.
Okay, thank you, Pearl. We reflected on the what you lose or gain, and we reflected on how you can be needing to let go before you anticipated. So, and how that can be challenging if you've maybe anticipated your coaching journey is going to last maybe 9 months, and for whatever reason that team coaching intervention finishes early, and how as a coach, remembering that you're role modeling what you're trying to help your team with, and in that moment that might be difficult to process if that wasn't where you were anticipating things were heading. So then leaning into, well, what might be the gift here? What is the learning? How does that shape things for me in the future as I work with my next team? What have I really learned here? So that piece around always be learning, and that teams in themselves are always shifting and changing. So it's very unsurprising really that things may finish or begin or end or re-begin at any time. So yeah, and then we came to talk, we moved on to, because Louise is actually a country director of a team. So she was able to share some of her own experiences of what was challenging most for her and the team, and what things had worked for her in terms of helping the team. But trust came up and conflict in the team. And so the things that we often see, and we were talking about what can work and what has worked for her, which was a really interesting insight. So we thank her for that.
Okay, thank you so much, Caroline, and your team. The next one is Natalie, your team, with Connie, Pan, and Eneth. So I'm not sure who's Natalie. Maybe you are going to be the person feeding back.
We haven't discussed that part, but fine. Yes. So Nadia, Alison, and myself, we talked through our experiences so far, and really we came with such different things from, for example, you know, having that sense of really being grateful, you know, deeply grateful to the team, because they're really, you know, in general, this could be people you have never met before, which are totally new, and they open up, you know, their world to you, and you go together through the journey with them, being as well kind of deeply satisfied and happy to what, you know, they have achieved at the end. As well as sometimes it can actually be, if the team coaching assignment is particularly long or, you know, very complex after a couple of years, can as well be on top of that like a sense of relief, you know, and everybody goes the separate ways, but like, you know, so much is on the, in a sense, on the shoulders during that time of a team coach. Nadia as well was sharing from her context when the teams were constantly, team members were constantly switching. It is within the healthcare sector, and somehow this ending never really comes about. So you're in a perpetual non-ending, however to say. Nadia, please unmute and put it in better words. That was your example. So I think like we had a myriad of things, but overall these are really positive emotions, and you know, they overpower any misgivings, let's say, and any negative. And of course, it is constant learning about oneself and the team and the context, the wider context team operates in.
Wonderful, thank you, Natalie and Nadia. Connie, Emma, and Mairead.
Yeah, it'll be me.
Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, no worries. Let me just put you back all on speaker view, then I can see you all about the gallery. So I've just been trying to bucket our group's findings into some general themes and then some specific learnings, which I think were really rich. The general themes were just loss on both sides, a sense of losing relationship, difficulty both on the coach's side, whether it's one-to-one coaching or team coaching, but also loss on the client side. And a specific learning, I think, related to that, in my own experience, I've done much more one-to-one coaching than team coaching, is that I am just much better at contracting and closing clearly and cleanly and tightly in one-to-one coaching, and yet to be much improved in terms of my team coaching, because of the way it can sometimes start in a kind of a more fluid way, and just start with a meeting and can we meet again and can we meet again, and not always getting tight enough around contracting. So the specific piece there is really how easy it is just to carry on and not end perhaps when I should do. Some other general ones was just the loss of feeling valued and knowing that you're contributing. Ongoing learning, particularly the example was around partnering with another team coach, that ongoing learning in that relationship there, and really ensuring that you're reflecting regularly. And then one more specific thing that came out, which I thought was a beautiful example of somebody who highlighted early on in her gut there's something going on here around engagement, around alignment, around participation. And the rest of the team, the people who weren't there, the rest of the team said, oh, it's okay, we're catching them up. And actually then in the last session, that issue came out again into the fore, like we weren't there, they weren't properly engaged. In other words, omitting the full use of self, and choosing not to trust that, and learning, oh gosh, I really have to trust that and call stuff out cleanly as we go.
Okay, thank you so much, Amber, and your group team. And then finally, Janet's team.
Okay, so thank you. This is really insightful. Our group only have one team coach and a group coach and a regular coach. So it was very interesting, and picking up on the common themes of loss for both the coach and the client. I think that loss of continuity and connection brought in a degree of sadness, and I guess a loss of old identities on both sides. In terms of gain, it was quite interesting. The coach, we have pride in what we were able to accomplish, as well as humility in being asked to accomplish it. A certain amount of joyfulness in being able to make that difference. And the word that came up twice was it was illuminating. For the coach, really illuminating to be in the field or in the system, and a sense of achievement. And the gain for the client, again, awareness, insights, distinctions, learning, a lot of clarity, and new facets and perspectives, a little bit more maybe humility and vulnerability, and a sense of possibility. I think that's very much the way I work, possibility for the future. Interestingly, when completing a group or a team assignment, there's a degree of exhaustion. I always find that, wow, I got through it, but I'm illuminated because I learned it's a dual learning process. So you've got if you're co-coaching or co-coaching, then you can actually share. One person speaks and the other observes, so it's less pressure. But it's actually a dual learning process between two coaches and the team, and it can be very collaborative, which is what I love. I've always, as a trainer in a previous life, I always liked co-facilitation because it's really collaborative and it makes it much more engaging and interesting for the group. So that was the essence of what we captured.
Thank you so much, Janet. And thanks to all of you that really, really added so much value to the session. Rachel, I'm going to leave you to bring it all together and close up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. I loved that feedback. It was really great, and it's always fascinating to hear what people make of endings. And I think some of the things that you brought up are some of the reasons why often we kind of ignore endings, or we kind of move on very quickly. So there's all the positive side of things, absolutely, but that sense of vulnerability, that sense of loss, that sense of letting go, that sense of relief. I think we've all had teams that we've worked with where it's kind of like, great, that's come to an end and I can move on now, because not all teams are the same and not all contexts are the same, and that kind of that exhaustion. I think that was a really interesting comment, Janet. That kind of thinking about energy levels is a really, really insightful piece to use when you're thinking about endings. What contribution has this team made to your energy? Do you feel tired? Do they make you feel invigorated? Do they make you feel joyful? And I think we can use that all the way along throughout the process, and then at the end, and notice what's changed or what's different, because not every assignment is great. And I love that kind of walking on ice or walking through mud. It's absolutely spot on in terms of team coaching. We've got some time now for networking, another half an hour. I'm more than happy if you want to take it. If anyone's got any burning questions, they want to ask, let me know. If not, I'll attempt to put you back into groups to do some networking. But has anyone got anything they want to ask? No, you're all in that reflective space. Okay, so I'm going to put you now, I hope, into groups to have a little follow-up networking. So I'm just going to open the rooms back and put you back in.